The first thing my son did after I paid off his college debt, bought him his first house, and spent 30 years building a life for him, was look me in the eyes and say, "I wish you were never my father." I stood there holding the birthday gift I had bought him, listening to the one person I had sacrificed everything for speak those words like they meant nothing. My hands were shaking, but I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't beg him to take it back. I just placed the gift on the table, picked up my keys, and walked out of his house. But what my son didn't know was that leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment everything started to change. For 35 years, I had worked 2 jobs to make sure my son Daniel never felt the struggles I had faced. After his mother passed away when he was only 8, I became his father and his mother at the same time. I cooked his meals, helped him with homework, stayed awake during his sickness, and worked through holidays just so he could have the opportunities I never had. There were nights when I came home with empty pockets, but I still smiled when Daniel asked, "Dad, did you eat yet?" I always lied. "Yeah, buddy, I'm fine." The truth was, I often went to bed hungry because I wanted him to have a full plate. Years later, that little boy became a successful businessman. He wore expensive suits, drove luxury cars, and lived in a beautiful house in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Everyone told me I should be proud, and I was. I would stand in the corner at his company events, watching people shake his hand, thinking, "That's my son." But slowly, something changed. Daniel started looking at me differently. The same son who once ran to the door when I came home from work started acting like I was an embarrassment. "Dad, you can't just show up at my office wearing old clothes," he told me one day. I looked down at my jacket. It was old, but it was the same jacket I wore when I helped him pay for his first business license. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He didn't even notice the pain in my voice. Then came the day that broke me. It was Daniel's birthday. I had spent weeks preparing something special for him. It wasn't just a gift. It was something that could change his future. I had kept it hidden because I wanted it to be a surprise. When I arrived at his house, I heard voices inside. Daniel was talking to his wife, Emily. "He needs to understand that he doesn't belong in my life anymore," Daniel said. My heart stopped. I stood outside the door, frozen. Emily asked, "But he's your father. He gave you everything." Daniel laughed. "Everything? He only did what a father was supposed to do. I never asked him to sacrifice his life for me." Those words hurt more than anything I had ever heard. But then he said something that changed everything. "Honestly, I regret having him as my father. He reminds me of where I came from. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. The child I protected from every hardship was ashamed of the man who protected him." I walked inside and Daniel immediately became quiet. He looked surprised to see me. "Dad, how long have you been standing there?" I looked at him for a few seconds, long enough for him to realize I had heard everything. Then I calmly placed the gift on the table. "You know, Daniel, I spent my whole life making sure you would never feel worthless." My voice was low, but every word carried the pain I had hidden for years. "But today you made me feel exactly that." He rolled his eyes. "Dad, you're being dramatic." That was the moment something inside me finally changed. Not because my son hurt me, but because he truly believed he hadn't done anything wrong. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house keys, and placed them next to the gift. Daniel looked confused. "What are you doing?" I looked at the son I had given everything to. "I'm giving you exactly what you wanted." He frowned. "What does that mean?" I opened the door and walked away. "It means you finally get to live without me?" Daniel smiled like he had won. He had no idea that the father he just pushed away was the same man who secretly owned the one thing his entire future depended on. And when the truth came out, Daniel would finally understand the real value of the person he threw away. I left Daniel's house that night with nothing but a small bag and the pain of a broken heart. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking about how to protect someone else. I was thinking about how much of myself I had lost trying to make my son happy. The next morning, Daniel called me. I looked at the screen for a long time. A part of me wanted to answer immediately. The same part of me that spent 35 years running whenever he needed me. But another part whispered, "Not this time." I let the phone ring. A few hours later, he called again. Then again. Finally, he sent a message. "Dad, we need to talk." I didn't reply. For the first time in his life, Daniel had to experience what it felt like when someone stopped chasing him. Days passed. Then weeks. And during that time, Daniel started noticing things he had ignored for years. The house he loved so much, the business he was so proud of, the comfortable life he enjoyed. They were not built only by his hard work. There was a hidden truth he never knew. Years earlier, when Daniel was struggling to start his company, I didn't just give him money. I became a silent partner. I invested my retirement savings into his dream because I believed in him when nobody else did. But I never told him. I didn't want him to succeed because of my help. I wanted him to believe he succeeded because he was capable. The legal documents were clear. I still owned a percentage of the company, and I had one more secret. The biggest investor in Daniel's company, the person everyone thought was just a wealthy businessman, was actually my old friend, Michael. Before I walked away, I had already spoken to him, not to destroy Daniel, not to take revenge, but to protect myself. Michael had seen every sacrifice I made. He knew the truth. He knew who built the foundation Daniel was standing on. One morning, Daniel walked into my small apartment. For the first time in years, he wasn't wearing an expensive suit. He looked tired, broken. "Dad," he said softly. I didn't answer. He looked around the room and saw the simple life I had chosen. A small table, an old chair, a few family pictures, pictures of him when he was still the little boy who loved his father. His eyes filled with tears. I was wrong. Those 3 words were the ones I waited years to hear. But they didn't erase the pain. Daniel sat down. "I thought because I became successful, I became better than you." He looked at the floor. "But the truth is, everything I have came from someone who never stopped believing in me." I stayed silent. Then he said something that shocked me. "I found out about the company." My heart stopped for a second. He continued, "I found the documents. I found out you were the reason I had a business in the first place." A tear rolled down his face, and I hated myself when I realized I pushed away the person who loved me the most. I looked at him and finally spoke. "Daniel, do you know what hurt the most?" He looked up. "It wasn't the words you said. It was that you forgot who was standing in front of you." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Dad." For a moment, I saw the little boy I raised. Not the businessman, not the man who was ashamed of me, just my son. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I told him, "I can forgive you, but trust is something you have to rebuild." Daniel nodded. "I understand." And for the first time, he didn't argue. Months passed. Daniel changed. Not because he lost control of his company, not because he was afraid of losing money. He changed because he finally understood what mattered. He started visiting me every week. He called just to ask how I was. He stopped caring about appearances and started caring about people. One day, we sat together watching an old family video. On the screen was a little boy holding my hand. Daniel smiled. "I remember that day." I laughed. "You cried because you didn't want to go to school?" He smiled. I didn't know I had the best teacher in the world standing next to me. I looked at my son, the same son who once said he regretted having me as his father. Now he was the man who finally understood my worth. I never needed revenge. I never needed to destroy him. The greatest punishment for Daniel was realizing he almost lost the one person who would have stood beside him forever. Because sometimes the strongest lesson you can give someone is not fighting back. It is walking away and letting them discover what life feels like without the person who always loved them. And in the end, Daniel learned the truth I had known all along. Money can buy a house. Success can buy respect. But nothing in this world can replace a father who gave everything for his child.